Alright, welcome back to another video. Today is the aftermath video. Well, what a night it was for PBC, and what a night it was for your boy. And we're about to see if I was right or wrong in today's video. Starting with the prelims, we're gonna be quick. I don't want to make a video as long as the last video. But unanimous decision victory for Luis Nunez. I mean, like I have right here, it was pretty straightforward dominance for Nunez. He did very good. He was very sharp, very strong. And that was my first W of the night. Like I said last video, I favored Nunez to win. And I did say that it was going to be by unanimous decision or split decision. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking more in detail as not just showing off that I was right, but I'm also going to be talking about who I believe they should be fighting next and why. For the winners, if you guys want a video about the losers, let me know. But for Luis Nunez, I believe that what's next for him is a little step up in the level of opposition that he should be having. Now, I think the time is about right that he does this. So one option that I have here is on my far left. As you can see, his name is Hoppy Price. He was formerly IBO International Champ at 122 before he decided to move up to 126, where Luis Nunez fights at. And in this campaigning at 126, he became WBA International Champion. He has a record of 12 fights, 0 losses, 0 draws, and 5 by knockout. Not really a hard puncher, but he's more technical, he's more savvy, and I think stuff like that, facing somebody like that, is what Nunez is going to need in order to really gain experience and really gain, the mileage of fighting several different styles and several different people around the world before he really gets in there with trying to push to fight against higher level oppositions. Now, to the right, the bald guy and that I have here, his name, I'm sorry I butcher it, is Keisuke Matsumoto. He currently has a record of 12 fights, 12 wins, 8 by knockout, 0 losses, 0 draws. He's currently the Japanese champion and the WBO Asian champion at 126. Same thing. He's not as technical wise as the previous one that I mentioned, Price, but he does have the nice combination of the Asian style where they're very good brawlers, but at the very same time they have a lot of technicism to them. And I just think it's a perfect fight to really get out there, explore hard up-and-coming guys from around the world, and kind of, begin to develop yourself as an actual proper prospect that can be taken serious. Now, moving on to the guy on the right, the one with hair. Again, sorry if I butcher his name, but his name is Mikato Nakano. He is currently Oriental champion at 126. So he's a little bit, in terms of the belt he has, he's a little bit behind Matsumoto, but still very good. Like I said, in the prospect level that Nunez is kind of dealing with. Mikito has a record of 14 wins, 13 by knockout, 1 loss, 0 draws. Like I said, he has that style of the Japanese where it's a mixture of brawler with technicism and good footwork, but he is leaning more towards brawler, as you could tell by his record. Now, he is a southpaw as well, so that could be kind of something, like I said, to add to the experience that Nunez could gain by fighting people before he goes in there with the higher level oppositions. And I think one of these three, and all three of them, are perfect step up fights to really show if Nunez is a guy to be taken serious as a prospect at 126 pounds. Moving on to Lucero's 8th round TKO victory. Once again, this was the second W for your boy. This fool came out here, just like I said, it was going to be a powerful fight for both of these guys. In the sense, what I mean by powerful in the sense that both guys have the same exact style. They like to brawl. They like to be in the close range and deal heavy blows and see who can last. And I did favor Lucero to win, and I did favor him to win by knockout. Although I did miss out by 1 round. I believe I recall saying that he was gonna get a knockout by the 9th round. But I did say that this fight was not gonna go the distance, and that my favorite in the fight was Lucero. And just like I also said, it was a great back and forth fight. Just that Lucero was a little better, and that demonstrated by him knocking him out. Now, what should Lucero do with this victory? Now, the number one option that I have could be against a guy known as Joseph Spencer. A lot of you fools may not know who Joseph Spencer is, and the few that do know him because he just one of his most recent fights, his second to the previous one that he just had, once against Tim Tszyu in Australia, when Tim Tszyu was doing a rebound fight after being knocked out by Motorzaliev. So, I think this is a good fight because although he has lost both times, like I have it stated here, but although he has lost both times against somebody like Tim Tszyu and Ramos Jr., who's also in this video, we're going to be talking about him later, he lost to them, but that's experience of how he was able to deal with them. With Tszyu, he got stopped, I think, around the 8th, 9th round. Old Tszyu would have gotten him sooner, but I believe that since Tim was kind of coming back, a little PTSD, a little shell shock, coming back from being knocked out like that, I do believe that he was a little bit more timid, a little bit more careful. But I think this is a good fight because if Lucero could come in here and do a lot better job than Ramos Jr. or Tim Tszyu, who are higher level individuals than him, if he could come in there and do a lot worse to Joseph, that would be a perfect statement. That's why I wrote down right here, could make a statement with him in the sense of like, look what happened when Spencer fought Tim Tszyu, look what happened when he fought Ramos Jr., and look what happened when he fought me. Look how bad I did him compared to the other guys. If he's capable of doing that, that's why I think it's a good fight for him. Second option, and I think this one would be a lot more favorable for his career in terms of exposure, that would be against Vargas Jr., son of the legendary, well, I wouldn't say legendary, but I really did enjoy watching him fight. Son of Vargas, the Feroz. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Spencer currently has a record of 20 wins, 11 by knockout, 2 losses, both of them by KO and 0 draws. Vargas Jr., on the other hand, the second option that I have for Lucero, is sitting around 17 wins, 15 by knockout, 0 draws, and his last fight was his first defeat of his career against Colin Walsh in the undercard of Crawford and Canelo back in September of 2025. And like I said, it's just first loss of his career. He also apparently is, by the state of Nevada, not allowed to fight until March 12th of next year, 2026, because of medical reasons. Not because of drugs or anything like that, but medically, he is not allowed to fight in the state of Nevada, aka Las Vegas, aka one of the towns of boxing. He is not allowed to fight until March of next year. But that could be a perfect fight to come back to. He just had his first loss against the best opponent of his career in the biggest stage of his life. It'd be a perfect fight to fight someone like Lucero. Comeback fight for him to look good against a guy who is a knockout guy, brawler. Their styles will mix and match. Lucero's not much of a mover, so that would be good for Vargas. And in terms of being good for Lucero, this is very good. Vargas Jr. is somebody who doesn't have the accolades, but already has the fan base, the exposure, and the name because of his father and because of his other 2 brothers and him combining, trying to become a boxing dynasty by all 3 of them becoming world champions. So I think this is a good fight. Moving on to Frank Martin, who surprised the hell out of me in terms of how quickly and destructive he did the knockout. This was your boy's third W of the night. I did favor Frank Martin. I did say that he was going to be a comfortable unanimous decision win, but if he was to win by knockout, it was going to be around the 7th round. He beat me to it. He did it in the 4th round, and all 4 rounds was just complete domination of Frank Martin. Now, I will be clear. I do understand it's a return fight, plus it's a new weight division for Frank Martin, so it wasn't going to be that tough an opponent. I just didn't think he was going to do that fast and that devastating of a fashion. Now, who's next? For me, Frank Martin is a guy who is tough. He's there. He has the skills. He has the ability. He has enough power. I don't think he should be sitting around fighting the same level of opposition guys. You know, he had his boots and his moment where he fought a guy who was decent enough to introduce him to the weight class and to bring him back after fighting for, I think, a little bit over a year was his last time he fought when he got knocked out by Gervonta Tank Davis. And, you know, he got the ring rust out. He dipped his toes in the new division, in the waters of the new division. So I think now that we have that out of the way, he should start really focusing on building his career at 140 against actual good propositions that's going to make him climb the ranks of the division. Now, starting with the first option that I have is Adam Azim. Adam Azim, I have his track record right here. First, he became WBC Youth Champion. Then he became European Champion. Then he became IBO World Champion. If you consider the IBO to be a legitimate sanctioning body that, you know, does give somebody world level status by being world champion, that's on you. I currently don't really believe so, but I do think it's a good indicator of how good a fighter is if he does have the world championship belt for the IBO. But I just don't think it actually gives him world class status. But he's currently in his best belt in terms of the where he ranks in the system is his WBO Intercontinental belt. That's the highest he has right now. And I think it's a good fight. I think it's a good fight for Martin. They fight very similarly. Adim is sitting around a perfect record of 14 wins, 11 by KO, zero losses, 0 draws. You know, he's undefeated. He's coming from the UK. And they both have very similar styles where they like to be slick, they like to be fast, but they like to really put some power behind their punches, especially Azim. Frank isn't really like that. He's less of trying to put power behind the punches as opposed to Azim, but they're very similar in the sense of the style. And I think it's a very good fight. I think beating the WBO Intercontinental Champion, you know, could really help him try to climb those ladders of that belt, you know, potentially fight for the WBO champ. And overall, I think it would be a respectable fight for Frank Martin. And same thing for Azim. I don't see why his team and him wouldn't take this fight to beat somebody like Frank Martin. Same thing with Lucero. Like I said when I mentioned Joseph Spencer, he could use a win over Frank Martin to elevate his status, because it's like, look what happened when Frank Martin fought Gervonta Tank Davis as opposed to me. I got him out there earlier. I destroyed him easier. Yada yada. You know the deal. That would be good promoting for his name if he was able to do something like that. Now, my second option, he's a little bit more tougher in my opinion than Azim, and my second option is Oscar Duarte. Many of you guys may not know him. Many of you guys may know him. And if you do know him, you'll probably most likely only know him as the guy who fought Ryan Garcia when Ryan Garcia made his debut at 140 pounds and he got knocked out by Ryan Garcia. And, you know, he's also the guy that Ryan Garcia to this day has as the hardest puncher he's ever faced. Oscar Duarte is currently sitting at a record of 30 wins, 23 by KO, 2 losses, 1 by knockout against Ryan Garcia, and 1 draw. Ever since he lost to Ryan Garcia, he's been on a win streak against very good names. One of them wasn't really that good. You know, it was a comeback fight. Plus, it was his first fight with Oscar De La Hoya, signing him right after his loss against Ryan Garcia. But one of the good wins that I have for him is against Joseph Diaz. I do understand Joseph is a small guy for 140, but you have to remember Joseph Diaz has never been stopped in his whole career from 130 to 135 to 140. Everybody he had faced almost damn near everybody in the divisions, and nobody was able to stop him. But Oscar Duarte was capable of stopping him early in their fight, and his latest fight was for the WBA Continental Americas champ, and that was against Smith Jr. I think that was a respectable win as well to kind of put him in that level of being taken a little bit more serious as a prospect at 140. He was also the NABF champion before fighting Ryan Garcia, but like I said, currently the WBA Continental Americas champ, and I think this is a good fight. I don't see why Oscar Duarte and Oscar De La Hoya, his promoter at Golden Boy, wouldn't allow this fight to happen against Frank Martin. Like I said, they could use the name of Frank Martin. They could use leverage of being like, look what happens when he fights me versus what happened when he fought someone like Gervonta Tank Davis. I destroyed them easier. I got him out there faster. I'm the real deal. He could use a name like that of Frank Martin in his career. And same thing for Frank Martin. Victory over Oscar Duarte, especially if he could put a little bit belt to ass kind of movement, even if he doesn't stop him or anything. Because I don't think he stops Oscar Duarte. But that would be a good fight. Be a good fight for Frank Martin. It would be a good way to put himself in the ranking for the WBA. And it would be a good way to be like, this is my new division. Moving on to the next win for your boy. I was on a roll this night. Every fucking fight, I was winning. Ramos Jr. unanimous decision victory over Mosley Jr. Just like I said that this fight was going to be good. There were going to be a little bit back and forth, a little bit of technicism, a little bit of, machismo and like, can you take my punch? Can I take your punch? But I did say that a unanimous decision victory was for Ramos Jr. or a split decision victory, and I was right. Now, Ramos currently resides at 160. So what is next for Ramos at 160 pounds? To me, these are my two options for him. And the reason these are my two options for Ramos Jr. is because you got to remember that in the night for this card, for the PBC card, Lara was supposed to unify his WBA belt against Janabek, who's the WBO and IBF champion of the world at 160 pounds. Janabek, 1 week before the fight, gets popped for enhancement drugs, steroids, whatever you want to call it. He gets popped for illegal substance. That's why Lara ended up fighting Gonzalez. Now, the reason I have these two is because those two belts, aka the WBO and the IBF, are most likely going to be stripped from Janabek, aka they're going to be vacant in need of a champion. So they need to start putting guys against one another to really see who can be the new champion for said belts. Now, he can fight the guy to the left, who I have here as my first option. His name is Vito Mielnicki Jr., currently residing at 22 fights, 13 by knockouts, 1 loss, 0 draws. His loss was ages ago. He hasn't lost since. I have his record right here. First, he was IBF USA champion. Then he became IBO Americas champion. Then WBC USA champion. And currently, his highest level belt that he defends to this day is the WBO Global Champion. Now, just like I put here, pretty good for the Janabek vacant title, because he's already put himself in the WBO rankings, beating someone like if Ramos Jr. could come and beat Vito and put himself higher in the WBO rankings, I don't see why they wouldn't put Ramos Jr. versus somebody else for the vacant WBO title. Now, his second opposition that I have selected, who I think is the best for Ramos Jr., is Denzel Bentley, currently sitting at 21 wins, 17 by knockout, 3 losses, 1 draw, and one of those losses via KO. So this man is British champion, then became European champion, and is currently his highest belt is the WBO International Champion. So his belt for the WBO is higher than Vito's. And same thing, it's a good fight for Janibek's vacant title because I wholeheartedly believe that there's no way they don't start stripping Janibek of those two titles. And immediately after stripping those titles, those sanctioning bodies are going to start looking for guys to really put against one another to be champion. So Ramos beating any one of these guys, especially my number 2 option in Denzel Bentley, because Bentley does have a higher ranking belt for the WBO than Vito does, would put the winner, if Bentley beats Ramos, I don't see why I wouldn't put him at a higher position to possibly fight for the vacant WBO belt. Same thing for Ramos. Ramos beating one of these guys or both of these guys would put him at a very beautiful spot to either be elevated to world champion or to be put against somebody else to fight for the vacant belt, which I think that's more of the possibility. But one of these two guys could put him in that position for the WBO belt, because I don't see a world where Janibek is going to remain champion of either one of those two belts for very long. Moving on to Lara's last-minute KO victory over Gonzalez. Now, before I get into what is next for Lara, I do have to mention that my decision on what is next for him, in my opinion, was based off the performance. I currently, in my old video, said Lara isn't showing signs of aging. He isn't really aging as fast as somebody who is 42 and has had the hard fights and the hard camps as Lara has. Should be looking, but in this fight, it did look. Gonzalez, you got to remember, last minute decision, replacement for Janibek. He got the call on Monday, accepted it, and was scheduled to fight Saturday against Lara. And he wasn't good as I expected, Lara being Lara, but at the same time, Lara didn't look good either versus a guy who's, he's been training and he was staying ready, but he had a week to prepare for the fight. He had a week to prepare for the weight, and I just don't think Lara should have done as much with Lara than he did. With everything stated, him being last minute. And so it's like if Gonzalez did have a full camp, he possibly could have beaten Lara. And, maybe it was just an off night for Lara because Lara had prepared for a whole different fighter than Gonzalez. But I just think he should have gotten him out easier. Now, in my opinion, Lara was winning pretty comfortably in the points, in the rounds. But I just think the knockout came kind of late because I was expecting kind of a liver shot. That's kind of what happens with a lot of these foods that you see take last minute, replacement calls. Their liver is kind of the first thing that gets out there, because they're focused more on their time on trying to make the weight. Because the last week, he can't go all out in training, even though he's already been in the gym, but he can't go all intense around to get more condition, more strength and whatnot to prepare for the fight. He has to mainly focus on cutting those 3, 2, 5, whatever many pounds he was over the limit when he got the call. So typically, dehydrating themselves affects the liver. So a lot of times these guys can't last that long. I mean, look at Padley. Padley was last minute call for Shakur Stevenson when Schofield got out. And Shakur doesn't hit hard. Padley has been shown to be able to go toe-to-toe with guys who hit hard. But Padley being last minute, his liver wasn't, at 100%, and he got dropped and stopped by several liver shots. So anyways, with that being said, what is next? I personally think that he should retire. As a champion, as a winner, in glory, he should retire. Especially after what I just saw. Like I stated the whole fight. But if he doesn't, Janibek is most likely going to lose his WBO and IBF belt at 160 pounds, like I've mentioned before for the Ramos portion of the video. he should probably look forward for that. If he's gonna stick around, he should probably look forward to trying to claim one, if not both of these belts against whoever the WBO and the IBF says he should fight against in order to get that belt. You know, the WBO could probably be like, my number one guy against Lara, winner takes the belt. Same thing for the IBF. IBF could be like, this is my number one guy. Lara, you face him. The winner would become IBF champion, and then also Lara will be putting in risk his WBA championship belt. But if he can't get a fight for whatever reason to try to collect one of these two belts that are most definitely going to be vacant, then the only other champion is WBC champion Carlos Adames, who he could try to unify against. Like I said, if the possibility of him collecting one of those vacant belts is out of the question for him. But I do believe a retirement fight, if he doesn't retire now, then selecting a fight where he's going to look good, he's going to look at his best, selecting an opponent where he could be the Lara we know, and that'd be a beautiful, goodbye to the sport, to the fans for him, so be it. But I think he should retire, but if he doesn't, these are my two options for him. Now, Foster's one-sided belt-to-ass victory over Stephen Fulton. This, once again, was a happy, another dub for your boy, who I did say Foster was going to unanimously win against Stephen Fulton. I did say if he was going to TKO, it was going to be in the last rounds, and it wasn't going to be a knockout. It was going to be TKO, which I think there was moments he could have done it if he pressured just a little more, especially in those later rounds where Fulton was just completely and utterly outclassed and didn't know what to do and was just lost, wasn't listening to his corner, wasn't even paying attention to them. I think in those moments, if Foster put a little bit more pressure into really trying to hurt Fulton more, he could have possibly gotten a TKO victory. But I did say he was going to get a unanimous victory over Stephen Fulton. Now, with that being said, this one is a tricky one. This one's a two-part because you have to remember that they were fighting for Foster's 130-pound WBC belt. But since Stephen Fulton came 2 pounds heavier, aka not making the 130-pound threshold, they decided to make the fight where the winner would become the new WBC 135-pound interim champion. So if Foster decides, hey, you know what, I made 130, I can still make 130. If he decides to be 130, I think these are his two options that he should be looking at, is to either unify a fight against WBO champ I don't know why I'm blanking, but Navarrete. Their names already have been tied. Last fight that Navarrete had where he won, Foster was in the side. They called him up. They said, hey, there should be a fight that should be happening next between these two champions. Calling him out, yada, yada. Their names already have been linked. So I think that's a good fight for Navarrete. I think that's a good fight for Foster as well. Now, the other fight that I think should happen if he stays at 130 is against a unification fight with the IBF champion Nunez. Now, I think this would be a little bit better than Navarrete because Nunez is a very hard-hitting and hard, he's a kind of like a tank. He can take punches very well. I just think he has a little bit more skills, boxing-wise, like technical-wise, than Navarrete. Navarrete is very awkward. He doesn't really have a style. He's more of a brawler. So I think Nunez is a more entertaining, more possibly back and forth struggle fight for Foster, and Foster would be a good struggle fight back and forth for Nunez. But if he does decide to stay at 135, well, I should rather say move up to 135 and be the WBC interim champion, I think these two fights are what should happen next for Foster. I'm leaning more towards Abdullah Mason, my first option. Abdullah Mason, just recently in a very good fight, right here in Ring 4 in Saudi Arabia, became world champion for the first time and currently the youngest world champion in boxing right now when he claimed the WBO vacant title that was taken from Keyshawn Davis. Now, he's young. He still has a lot to learn, but he's very good. He's very talented. He has that raw talent, that raw energy and passion. And, you know, typically with these young guys, especially top rank guys, we all know top rank, how they move. They typically like to have a good title defense for their guys to look good before we really start taking or paying attention to possible other hard fights. And in my opinion, a perfect fight for Mason to defend his belt for the first time, to be in Cleveland, where he's from, you know, in front of his fans, in front of his people, you know, at home, welcome as a champion, would be against Foster. I think, you know, it would show more qualities of what Abdullah Mason can do in the ring against a technical fighter and what he can do when things start going his way, you know, putting belt to ass. Mason could come in there and put belt to ass against a respectable guy, and I think that would be the combination of a fight where Mason can be more comfortable to win, while at the same time having the beauty of, in the eyes of the people, this would be a very good first title defense, a very good opponent for his first time ever defending his world championship belt. Very respectable. On the hand of Foster, this would elevate him. A win over Abdullah Mason would elevate him to being a 2-division world champion and to being considered one of the best fighters right now, you know, especially at 135. If he's able to come in there and defeat somebody like Abdullah Mason, you know, considered the prospect of the year for many people, considered contender of the year for many people, considered, you know, one of the best new things to come for boxing, you know, 21-year-old world champion. He has so many years left in the sport, and he's already a world champion. So Foster being someone like Abdullah Mason would be something incredible for his career. Now, second option is Shakur Stevenson, the WBC 135-pound champion. Now, the reason this is an option is for two reasons. Reason number one is obviously has just become the WBC interim champ, so the only person higher than him via the WBC is Shakur Stevenson, who's the world champion. And then reason number two, they've been exchanging words on Twitter. They already, you know, saying that I beat your ass. The other fools are saying I beat your ass, you're easy work. So it's like, let's get it on. But that does depend on whether or not Shakur Stevenson can or is willing to come back after going to 140 to fight Teofimo Lopez. If he decides, hey, I'm going to stick at 140, I'm going to campaign at 140 as much as I can, and that belt is vacant, well, that's good for Foster. Foster either gets elevated to world champion, or he just gets to fight against another guy, and winner takes the belt. So that's what I think is good for Foster. That's what I think should be his new, where his eyes should be looking at for the future of his career. Here is the main event of the evening. Here is where a little bit of controversy, a little bit of headaches, a little bit of, you know, emotions going back and forth for people. But I personally, before I get into what's next, I personally was watching the fight just like every other fight for this video, but I also personally was keeping score of said rounds, of said, you know, just making sure at the end when the judges gave their scorecards, I believed, based on what I saw and what I wrote down, the outcome was right. So here it is. I gave round 1 to Cruz. I gave round 1, 3, 4, 8, 11, and 12 to Cruz. Round 3 being the knockdown that he gave to, his first ever knockdown in his career to Roach. So that's a 10-8 round. And I gave rounds 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10 to Lamont Roach. Round 7 being a 10-8 round in favor of Roach due to ref taking 1 point away from Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Now, a lot of people have been saying, especially Isaac Pitbull Cruz, his team and his fans, have been saying that that point deduction was taken in order to, not in favor of Roach, but I would say like to even the odds for Roach, since Roach had been knocked down. In my opinion, I didn't see favoritism from the referee. I didn't see the ref being favorite to any fighter. I didn't see him being a favorite to Roach or Cruz. But what I will say is that I didn't like the call only because he gave a warning, but a normal warning. Now, hang on, stay with me. What I mean by this is that typically when a ref is going to deduct a point, he gives a warning, and then if he's going to take a point, he says, "This is your last warning. Next time you do this, I'm going to strip a point from you." Or even if he doesn't give a first warning, he does go, "Next time you do this, I'm going to take a point from you, so don't do it again." That stricter, more defined, more specific warning wasn't given to Isaac Pitbull Cruz. He got one warning, and then the very next time he did it, they took the belt from. They took the point from him. That's my only concern with the moment. It's just that they could have been specific of being like, "Hey, I'm only gonna warn you this one time. If you do it again, I'm gonna take a point from you," and that's that. Instead, he just said, "Hey, don't do that," and then when he did it, they were just like immediately taking a point from him. So that's my only thing with the controversy of last night's fight. But as you could tell by the rounds that I gave to them, in my eyes, it was definitely a draw. So, what is next? Both of them at 140. Oh, well, I think the right thing to do is to have a rematch. I think that's what everybody currently would be asking from both of these fighters, is to really focus on rematching each other. But with that being said, Roach did say that he feels like he broke his hand. Nothing, as of making of this video, nothing so far has come out definitively from any medical people or from Roach and his people saying that he did in fact break his hand or that he fractured it. Nothing. So I think it should be a rematch, but my second option is if Roach did break his hand or he hurt it enough to where he's going to be out of the fight ring for a little bit, I think while he waits for Roach to get healthy, Cruz should, have a stay ready fight. But the opponent he should have is against somebody named Fierro. Many people may not know this, and the few that do would know, because that fight where Fierro and Pitbull Cruz had first faced each other was phenomenal. It was damn near fight of the year contender. It was just straight fucking putazos, beating each other up from round 1 to round 10, I believe they fought. So they were scheduled for a rematch. Pitbull Cruz won. Some people think it was a draw. Some people even think Fierro won and that he was robbed. So they were scheduled for a rematch. And they were going to. But then, the day of weigh-in, Fierro was told. Fierro's team was telling everybody that Fierro wasn't capable of fighting because he, due to the weight cut or whatever, he passed out. Medical people are checking him, medical staff said it's not safe for him to fight. So he had to be pulled out, and they did a last minute replacement where Isaac Pitbull Cruz won. And then that's when the Roach negotiation came about. So like I said, if Roach is not hurt and he's not injured, I think a fight between him and Cruz, aka the rematch, should be the next option for both fighters, without a shadow of a doubt. But if he is hurt, aka the fight can't happen because he's going to be out, then I think to stay ready, he should fight the original guy he was supposed to rematch in Fierro. Make that fight, get that fight out the way, show the people that, hey, I did beat him the first time and he was going to lose the second time that we were originally scheduled, and I beat him now. Now I'm just ready for Roach to get that rematch and, beat him this time. And I think that's just the best outcome for both. I think that's the best thing that should happen. That should be the only things that either fighter should be having in their mind. But with that being said, your boy is happy. Your boy's happy. Your boy predicted from the first fight of the prelims all the way to the main event. And only the main event was what I got wrong. I did say Roach had a 70% chance of winning. But I did say that if Roach gets a little too cocky and he fights more the style of Pitbull, he wants to go toe-to-toe, it was going to be dangerous for him, and that was going to lean into the 30% that I gave Pitbull of being the winner. And would you know it, he decided from round one for some reason to go toe-to-toe, got his ass dropped, and in my eyes, didn't do enough to win. Didn't do too much to lose, but he didn't do enough to win. So with that being said, I'm glad I was right. Hopefully you guys were right too, especially if you bet. And next time I'll be making a video. Stay out for that. I'm in the process of making a video before any other events come, which I think the closest one is the Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua. I will be making similar videos about that event like I did for this event. But I have a fight in between, a video in between that I wanna get out before all that shenanigans and Jake Paul stuff and Anthony Joshua. So that being said, thank you for watching. Subscribe. Check out my other videos. God bless. Rocco out.